Did you know that wood moves? Oh, yeah. I've heard a number of woodworking myths over the years, but it wasn't until recently that I actually experienced one firsthand. I've seen green deck boards and baseboards move with the seasons, but how much does wood really shift? Woodworkers are always suggesting avoiding face grain in grain joints, but I saw it as more of a guideline. Recently, using leftover butcher block and some 4/4 white oak boards, I made an end grain cutting board for my brother as a Christmas gift. The results were stunning. When he unwrapped it on Christmas Eve, he absolutely loved it. I was actually really proud of my work until I got a text the next day. Yeah, it turns out if you make a cutting board in a heated, conditioned space and then let it spend the night in a freezing car, it may cause the wood to move slightly. Or a ton. I'll let you be the judge. Another woodworking myth, which might not actually be a myth at all, apparently. I should probably start paying attention more. Anyway, the second myth is that wood glue is stronger than the wood it's joining. Yeah, apparently that's also true. If you see the way that the wood split here, you'll actually see that the wood cracked naturally and not along the wood glue joint. And quite another mystery, I actually put off fixing this project for a couple weeks as I decided how to approach this problem, and apparently, while it was sitting in my garage, the crack just closed up. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to get glue in here anymore. While I thought about how to fix my new problem, I cut off the existing border using my table saw, being careful, of course, to only cut about a half an inch of material at a time to save both the board and my table saw blade. As I'm disassembling the borders here, you can see that there's actually not enough glue spread across this piece. This could be a couple problems. It could be that I just didn't apply enough glue to begin with, or it could be that I squeezed my clamps too tight and the glue came out. So here's the deal. I really don't want to give this cutting board back again only to have it crack open. It's currently freezing outside, as you can see, so I'm going to leave this out here for a few hours to let it bring it down to temperature. Next, I'm going to bring it back inside and then expose it to some warm water to see if I can get that crack to open up again. If I am able to open up that crack, I'm going to slather a bunch of wood glue in there, clamp it overnight, and repeat this process again tomorrow to see if it's completely fixed. If not, I'm going to take and throw this in the fire pit and pretend it never happened. I have always wanted to do a hard maple end-grain cutting board. We'll just wait and see what happens. After running it through some warm water for a couple of hours, I really wasn't able to get that crack to open up significantly. I left the cutting board on the counter inside overnight, and when I woke up, it looked more like a bowl than a cutting board. I flipped the cutting board over and continued to let it air dry, and it was mostly flat after 24 hours. And I'll leave a link down below in the description for Sturdy Bones Woodworking, who showed in a video how to remove a warp in a board using a damp towel. Pretty cool. After just a couple minutes, the board is pretty darn flat. Like you saw in the beginning of this video, I fully milled up a board, and after that I cut it into thirds and then glued it all back together. You can see here I'm trying to make sure that I absolutely get enough glue in here and that I have enough equal clamping pressure across the board. After letting the panel dry for 24 hours, I took it to the table saw where I cut it into 1 3/4 inch strips on my cross-cut panel jig. And now the reason we're all here. Time to figure out what to do with this giant crack. First, I'd like to focus on all the small cracks, sanding everything down and then filling it in with wood glue and sawdust to fill the joint. You know what would make this a lot better? Much better. Just in case you're wondering, yes, I'm a huge Milwaukee fanboy, but I have to say, this is one of the only tools I've bought from Milwaukee that is absolute junk. Do not buy. After sanding the cutting board down to 60 grit, I believe, I filled in this crack with as much glue as I could and clamped it overnight using these cauls. Hopefully this will keep the board straight. And after 24 hours, I took everything out of the clamps and everything seems to look good. Now just to do some more sanding. Any cracks left after that, I'll use a CA glue and accelerator to finish filling them. Finally, after I spent about 3 hours sanding and filling all the cracks and gaps with wood glue and CA glue, I began the first set of white oak borders. Doing these borders in 2 steps allows me to oversize the first step to have an overlap on the 2 short sides. If that doesn't make sense, just hang tight. You'll see what I mean in a minute. After the glue dries, I can begin cutting down the 2 sides to rough length using a pull saw. Once I have the excess wood removed, I can use a flush trim router bit to flush up the border pieces. Be extremely careful with this ingrained wood. The corners will try and chip out. Now that those 2 border pieces are straight and flush, we can go ahead and continue our glue up. Adding these 2 additional border pieces after you trim up the first 2 allows you to have an overlap on your end grain. And once that's dry, I can begin flush trimming those as well. And now the fun part. The sanding continues. An important part of sanding a butcher block or a cutting board to make sure you get a very fine surface in the end result is to water pop in between sanding grits. Before I continue sanding, I'm going to use a small round over bit just to knock down the corners of this board a little bit. To check and make sure the depth is set correctly, I use a piece of scrap wood. Fixing this board also gives me a chance to add a couple of nice features I wasn't sure he wanted to begin with. First, I'm adding a juice groove. To do this, I've set up a quick jig to determine the length of template I need to cut in order to make a juice groove with rounded corners. By doing some quick math, I'm able to figure out how big my template should be. Using some double-sided tape, I've attached my template to the board. Being sure to move from left to right, I'm going slow and using multiple passes to get the depth that I want. This should prevent burning and tear out. What do you guys think about this inside template that creates a rounded corner? Do you prefer this or an outside template that makes a more sharp 90-degree turn? From personal experience, this one's easier to make. When I've completely finished the board, I'll also go and add a set of rubber feet to keep it off the counter. Now to fix a couple of these cracks and gaps. Just like before, I'm going to use CA glue and some accelerator spray to close up these cracks. And this is the part in the project where things start to get frustrating. You can see here I'm spraying these out. I'd fill them with CA glue, I'd spray them with accelerator, sand everything down, and then I would find new cracks. Not the existing cracks. I didn't just open them back up. I found new cracks. So I would do the same thing again. I would blow them out, clean them out as best I could, fill them in with CA glue, spray it with accelerator, and sand them down. And those ones were looking good. But then I would find more. I would continue to find more and more and more. And that's kind of where we're at now. So this project is now taking me about 2 months to complete, albeit I'm not really working on it all the time. This is happening in my free time. But I'm about fed up with it. And I've just have to step back and take a second and realize that this is a gift that I was making for somebody with free materials. So I have to take it at that. These free materials are the problem. This cutting board, butcher block wood that I was using from the beginning has a lot of unknown variables. I really don't know the species of it, although I have a good idea. I don't know what kind of glue they used. I don't know what kind of joints they had. I don't know a lot of different things. So I think that is the variable that I'm just not able to control enough. And so here it is. This is to a point where it's good enough. Okay, I know I just got done saying it, but just one more. I'm just going to fill this one crack because it's gigantic and it's on the border, and I'm just going to stop after this one. I promise. Because this is a pretty good crack and it is on the border, what I'm going to attempt to do is use some cawls and a clamp to just close up that border so you're not even going to be able to see this crack. Hopefully. This is the last one, I promise. Anytime you're able to, I would highly recommend wiping off wet glue as opposed to trying to scrape off hard glue later. I did end up sanding this for quite a while. I went and started at 80 grit and then moved up to 120 and then went to 220, and I think eventually I ended up stopping at about 320 and then water popped it, and then I did 320 again, and that's where we are right now. The first time I finished this cutting board, the first time when I actually ruined the cutting board, I finished it with Total Boats. I don't know, it's a bottle with a bear on it, and it's supposedly really good, but I didn't really like the yellow tint that it gave the board when I was finished with it. So this is an attempt at using mineral oil. And fun fact, this board was extremely dry, and maybe that's one of the reasons it was cracking before. Oh, good catch. But I ended up using about 16 ounces to finish this board, and it probably could have absorbed a little bit more than that. This board was very dry. Like I said, I ended up using about 16 ounces, the entire bottle of that mineral oil, but I did that in about 3 coats. I put on a coat, waited about an hour, put it on another coat, another hour, a third coat, and then another hour. After that, I wiped it off with a couple of clean rags. Just to be safe, I let it cure for about 24 hours before I touched it again. In the beginning, I set out to make a gift for my brother. And I accomplished that. The gift was not what I had expected it to be. My idea of an end-grain cutting board was obviously free of voids and cracks and many attempts to try to fix those cracks and avoid wood movement, but that didn't happen. But what I did learn are a lot of valuable lessons to take forward. In the future, I will not be using reclaimed wood to make an end-grain cutting board. In the future, I will make sure that all my glue is spread appropriately and given proper amount of time to dry and cure. And I'll also be using the experiences that I've taken away from this. Ultimately, I'm here as a hobbyist trying to do things that look fun in my garage, and I accomplished that. Being able to make a gift and give it to somebody and them being appreciative of that is just a cherry on top. If you guys enjoyed this video, pushing that subscribe button really helps me out. If you guys have any comments, please leave those down below in the comment section and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.